In a conversation about franchises that helped revolutionize the games industry, it is incredibly difficult to not discuss Halo. Since the release of Halo Combat Evolved over 2 decades ago, this franchise has been formative to countless gamers. And at the very least up until Bungie got off, Halo served as an absolute institution, through satisfying combat against funky aliens, narrative content that grew increasingly compelling as time went on, and undeniably enjoyable multiplayer gameplay. Halo became, at least for me, and I'm sure many others, the go-to first-person shooter. And I probably don't show those games enough love on this channel. Well, today I'm going to, in an attempt to defend the dignity of Halo, as it experiences something of a crossroads from my perspective. When Halo Infinite arrived back in 2021, it was enjoyable. A fun game that certainly felt like Halo, but was also held back by a few things that a lot of modern games suffer from. But I'm technically not here to deliver a video essay on any of the games, although that'll be fun for future content. But I wanted to address something more recent to the Halo franchise's history, as it were. For a long time now, many a popular video game franchise has been adapted into other media, such as big budget movies and television shows. I've been watching the Halo TV show of late, and it's somewhat amusing, but not only does it baffle me that it has a second season currently running, I also found myself perplexed as to why Paramount Plus would run a Halo adaptation that is frankly nothing like Halo. The only sensible conclusion I could draw is this show is an absolute bastardization. Don't ask why I continued watching, but I guess I just enjoy a good dumpster fire. But that brief touchdown doesn't really explain the Halo TV show's problem, so I suppose I wish to dive into it in a bit more detail. Not only does it give me something a bit different to do in these trying times, but I think there's a fair point to be made about why this TV show isn't being received quite as well as might have initially been hoped. I don't wish to cross-section the entire series and would rather discuss bullet points that I think are imperative to understanding just where this isn't clicking, so to speak. So hopefully that will give my otherwise mental, unstructured content some structure. So now that I've said everything I need to say, you can say the video starts at 2 minutes and 34 seconds in the comments and we can get to the first point. When it comes to adaptations of stories already told, the source material is important. And Halo, unfortunately, largely follows the trend of ignoring it. It's set in its own universe, therefore it's not canon to the games, or vice versa, and as a result it rearranges a lot of information to suit the narrative they want to tell, which is fine. But I find the TV show also relies a little bit on you actually understanding the Halo video game franchise in order for the TV show to make sense, which is where the issue crops up. Because instead of showing us everything we need to know when we need to know it, we're dumped with an awful lot of exposition that we're expected to have impact when the show within itself and the isolated capacity it's intended to be viewed simply cannot keep up. The Halo franchise has been established for a very long time in gaming years at least, so you can't just dive into an alternate timeline TV show about that universe and then tell the viewer everything to get on the same page. Yes, we know John 117 from the games, yes we know the Spartans from the games, but in the context of the show, an old man talking about Spartans as killing machines as practically the first scene means absolutely fucking nothing. Because when the Spartans actually show up shortly afterwards, a potential viewer who doesn't know anything about Halo still doesn't know that that's what that is. At least until this fella shouts Spartan at the top of his lungs, completely removing the gravitas from this fan service moment. It's one of many examples of this show telling us something rather than showing it to us to hype Halo fans up on fan service, only for the rest of the show to completely piss on what those people are actually fans of. As a result, you wind up insulting the intelligence of the Halo fan portion of the target audience, and delivering storytelling in a way unengaging to somebody who might be new to the overall franchise. Even if you're telling a story with differences to the Halo story we know from the games, the slower approach to the delivery of information is important to ensure you set up the story on a strong foundation, which I know is strange to say because the pacing of this show can only be described as bipolar. And there's a lot of unnecessary filler throughout the first season and the 5 episodes that have aired as of recording this video of the second, which means there was technically plenty of room for them to tell the story as if it was a new thing, and they needed to take their time with it so that the information could be experienced and ingested naturally by the viewer. Being able to control the flow of the narrative is key to enriching story beats, and it's important that this is done in order for the writing to stand a chance at being good. But the Halo TV series loses control of the storytelling fairly quickly by delivering tons of key information in exposition rather than flowing through the important events so we observe them, and then filling the gaps with the odd conversation that makes sense. That's how you introduce exposition properly. But how you go about doing that depends on what primary audience you intend to captivate, and in this case who that is meant to be is unclear. Is this show meant for new audiences? If so, use the source material to your advantage to deliver storytelling that feels fresh. Are you trying to appease the people who are already fans of the Halo series? Then treat the source material like the Bible. What you can't do is dismiss the source material, but also rely on people having knowledge of it to get a proper foothold in the storytelling, because there are a lot of people who simply won't put up with that. Because at best it's sloppy and at worst it's disrespectful. And if you're not looking nor discussing the games as the fundamental source material when approaching retelling this story for a new medium, the best you can hope to accomplish is slightly Halo-esque generic sci-fi. And that's what the first season of the Halo TV show felt like. And the second so far isn't much better. I get the desire of wishing to contribute and adding value to the franchise, but if you take your time with it and deliver your vision for it, it stands a greater chance of making for interesting television, and that's how you stand a greater chance of running long enough with a show like this in order to do it. So in conclusion, nothing good can come from committing to limbo. As for the second point I'd like to bring up, it is of course the elephant in the room. In the majority of main narratives in the Halo games, we play as Master Chief Petty Officer John 117, a Spartan 2 super soldier who's as stoic as he is strong, and one key aspect to his character is we as the player never see his full face. We're rewarded with seeing part of it if we completed Halo 4 on Legendary difficulty, but the only distinct detail you get to see is that Master Chief is not a young man. And the reason why we don't see his face while we play as him, so we can imagine ourselves being him. And over the course of the games, as he developed more and more character, it became part of his identity rather than allowing us to inject ours. In canon, his face is hardly a secret. A lot of the in-universe characters would know what Master Chief actually looks like. But to the player, over time it became the mystery best left unanswered. And I don't think this was necessarily intentional on Bungie's part, but not only did Chief's helmet become iconic to the fanbase, I'd go as far as to say it became sacred. And as his character evolved, this natural aspect factored in. The helmet isn't just there, it's taken into account in how Chief expresses mannerisms and emotions. Even though the helmet doesn't visually change, you know there's an expression. In fact, especially in the 343 games, emphasis is put on Chief's emotions to the point where you know what he's feeling even without seeing his facial expressions, and often he doesn't even have to say a word, yet it's articulated very well. As a result, in my opinion, Master Chief becomes 10 times the character than if he just started taking his helmet off and showing his face, because you can mentally project yourself in that armour and feel what he's feeling, humanising what is effectively a 7-foot-tall futuristic cyborg. And the best part is, though there were bumps on the road, it naturally developed that way. That said, I don't necessarily disagree with the decision to show Master Chief's face in the show. Pablo Schreiber isn't a bad look for it. I can't comment on his acting skills because I've only ever seen him in this, but I think it would be somewhat understandable if he wanted to put his face to his work. But I firmly believe it should have been a watermark moment of sorts rather than a constant presence. So I do fundamentally disagree with the dismissal of Master Chief's helmet. We see his face in the first episode of Season 1, which is frankly far too soon for such a moment, considering the weight it should have carried. So to a lot of Halo fans, understandably, it's going to come across as unearned. If you're going to put a face to a character who's been beloved for being faceless for the past 20 years, you must first earn the right to actually do it. And then not overly remind people that you did it, because in the TV show's sense, you know, regardless, the guy under the helmet probably looks a bit like a bloke named Pablo. So the mystery isn't like the game where it's what does he canonically look like, though there are depictions of him at different ages that give you a bit of an idea. But the mystery was, how would they go about presenting him? And what they wound up going with in the end, or the start shall I say, was frankly laughable. It held zero weight and contradicted the piggybacking introduction which I touched down on in my previous point, and what's worse is it's flippant to the mythos of the Master Chief. And yes, that will alienate a huge portion of your potential audience. But it's worse. The show is so adamant on presenting Master Chief as a conventional human that there are plenty of episodes where he's not even wearing his armour at all. And then there's the scene where he's bollock naked so the viewer can see his arse and so he can remove a plot device from his bag. A really plot cheapening device at that. At that point you're really taking the piss. When you go episodes at a time with Master Chief not doing anything remotely similar to what Master Chief would do in the games, you're not even depicting Master Chief anymore, are you? And this issue stems from not just the all-over-the-place pacing, but also the imbalance in the content. For an action show, there's not an awful lot of action here. Halo Season 1's total runtime is 7 hours and 36 minutes. And in that runtime, I think we get just under 7 minutes of Master Chief doing anything remotely Spartan. There's a video on YouTube compiling every Master Chief action moment, and it's about 6 minutes and 30 seconds long, and that to me is genuinely hilarious. Of course, it's an exaggerated timescale, as it's just the Master Chief action bits and not the entire scenes. But the point is, John 117 is underrepresented in a TV show that's about him, if that is indeed the correct term. And that appears to boil down to an inability to represent John as a character whilst also showing him as the super soldier he actually is. Humanizing this indoctrinated soldier like any other random human on the show subtracts value from the awe of the Spartans. And if that is the case, then perhaps it would have made more sense to not focus a story around the Master Chief at all. You see, the character points of his humanity and the fact that he's a super soldier are not mutually exclusive things. He's an indoctrinated and augmented child soldier. His existence in this story isn't inherently relatable, nor does he need an emotionally dampening pellet in his arse in order to make sense of him being vastly different to other human beings. His relatability stems from his interactions with other characters, moments where he shows, despite his insane strength and battle prowess, he's not entirely desensitized to everything going on around him, though his conditioning technically should say otherwise. And this gives him a steady development that doesn't subtract from his mindset nor his abilities to get the job done. And when that factor emerges, it's rewarding. The show puts these aspects in competition with one another, and were the presentation more balanced, it wouldn't even be a bad angle to explore. But there's too much focus on John the Man, and nowhere near enough emphasis on the Master Chief, the hardened augmented warrior whose very life is dedicated to service. And so this show doesn't just spark a controversy about Master Chief's helmet, but also the presentation of his character overall. Because the helmet isn't just a helmet, nor is it just a symbol. It's also a stabilizer, one that ensures no matter how human he becomes, he's still the Master Chief and this is still Halo. Without it, the show really starts to lose focus. But I suppose I can stop waffling about that now and move on to the next bullet point. Halo is plagued with an annoying subplot that nobody really seems to care about. The character of Quanha is introduced at the very beginning of the story, and her home is attacked by Covenant forces for some reason, which allows us to be introduced to the Spartans. Then after the fact, the writers, I suppose, couldn't quite figure out how to write her out, and so she sort of trails off into her own subplot that interrupts the interesting bits of the primary narrative if and when we get them, completely dismantling any modicum of momentum. And this show already had a momentum problem, with far too much time being taken up and nothing actually happening. And what's worse is Season 1 Episode 7 is entirely dedicated to the Quanha subplot, so the best part of an hour is wasted in one. There's nothing inherently wrong with the coming-of-age story they're attempting to tell here, it's just desperately far removed from the Halo story we were hoping to see. It's pitting a rebellion against the UNSC, and though we see the UNSC do some dastardly things, no doubt to suit that particular avenue of the story, the existential threat of the Covenant, who wish to wipe out all of humanity, takes a strange back seat, and then the writing quality just isn't there to make you care. And that's something else that I've noticed. The writing physically hurts. This is not an issue exclusive to Halo. There are many TV shows, movies, and even games with narratives that simply under a microscope make precious little sense. Especially if you're going to explore a completely new and alien angle to an iconic character, the writing really does need to be scrutinised within an inch of its life. Otherwise you may as well run 8 hours of people quite literally pissing on a copy of Halo the Master Chief Collection, which would frankly make for greater entertainment. My cruel jabs aside, here are some of the issues with the writing that plagues the Halo TV show. Firstly, every character in the show is irrational out their heads, and this is frustrating when it's done for plot convenience. Quanha's plot practically hinges on her making irrational decisions all the way through the story, which actually fuels the narrative of her subplot, which is really annoying. And this precedent is set early. She witnesses the Covenant kill absolutely everyone she knows, leaving her as the sole survivor. And though the UNSC ask her to help them with getting the word out among the outer colonies that there is an existential threat on the horizon, she chooses to instead threaten the UNSC by stating she'll claim they were the ones who killed everyone she knew, when she knows that's not the case and there is a bigger threat and the UNSC is being reasonable here. The UNSC in turn decides to be completely unreasonable, acting as if she had any leverage whatsoever, which she didn't, and sanctioned an execution. And that is the plot convenience to allow John, because he touched the magic object, to commit treason out of a moral duty of care. Admittedly, in this moment, she'd just lost her entire family. She wouldn't exactly have her thinking cap on. But surely to Christ, the characters she's now interacting with should, and give her some room to come to terms with it before deciding that this teenager for some reason needs to die. You can't really deliver a high-intensity story without a character who's a little bit irrational every now and then, especially when there's high tension. But there has to be a point where logic and rationale brings the story back down to earth before the entire TV show becomes a circus. And sadly there are too many moments in both Season 1 and Season 2 to this point where a lapse in logic and judgment has created bigger problems for the characters and even as far as the viewer by delivering a much less satisfying alternative to what a Halo show was expected to deliver. Because there's no good explanation for why they didn't just do that instead. And don't get me started on Ackerson in Season 2. This tosser knows the Covenant are en reach, and when the Master Chief voices his concerns about that possibly being a thing, he not only ignores him, he grounds the Spartans so they can't be used in combat, before fleeing Reach, having sounded the alarm to absolutely nobody below him, and taking the Spartans' armour for some reason. So in the entire episode dedicated to the fall of Reach, we don't really get any Spartan action when that should have been a hotbed for it. Sure, the Spartans present on Reach fight without their armour, and there's plenty of generic action in the episode, but none of it contains the iconic Halo look, because the less than rational character writing allows for a reason to simply not provide the fans with what they'd actually be looking for. It's this really strange thing I've noticed. Of course you can't give the fans what they want, because then they'd actually like the show. That said, I'm sure there are plenty of Halo fans out there who do like it. I don't speak for everybody ever, I probably should have clarified that sooner, I apologise. At least we got it in late. But back to the topic of nonsense that doesn't make sense. The Covenant have a human among their ranks, and Master Chief engages in naughty business with said character, and that will allow vain journalists to speculate as to whether or not they're going to procreate. The only thing these characters have in common is they can both instinctively interact with these artifacts and activate what can only be described as the nut. I suppose it makes some sense as that is actually what they do together, but what? I really don't get what value Makee as a character actually adds, and that's because of the writing, not necessarily because she exists. And I also don't know any Halo fan who was hoping to witness Master Chief lose his virginity. But there you go. The worst bit of nonsense on display in the Halo TV show is actually the bridge between the end of Season 1 and the start of Season 2. Master Chief gets taken over fully by Cortana, leaving him technically dead, I think. And this is so his body can hold the keystone without activating it. And though there is indeed a scene acknowledging that this did indeed happen at the start of Halo Season 2, it jumps to a bit where he's fine, and his connection with Cortana has been severed. Also, Makee gets killed, but she comes back. I mean, there are points where this show is entertaining because of all of this nonsense, but this show isn't intended as a comedy, so you're laughing at it, not necessarily with it. And I could go on and on with the ridiculous things that occur, but I think it's more concise at this point to just say the writing is a mess and move on, because a mess it most certainly is. To conclude this video before it becomes a lengthy one, There is a root problem to all of the Halo TV show's issues, and that is that it isn't perceived to respect the source material. There's no harm in being a little different, that's expected. In fact, in some ways it can be beneficial to rebel against what your story is based on. It can provide a new angle. But claiming you didn't look at the games nor did you discuss them, then dedicating the show to proving that isn't a new angle at all, it just becomes something else entirely. It doesn't cultivate the lore of the already established Halo universe properly, and it doesn't even serve as a jumping in point to the franchise because, in many episodes, it doesn't even resemble it. I think you've got to remember, we exist in a time where there are still loads of people who aren't familiar with the depths of the gaming world, and believe it's still just there for mindless fun, and the stories are only present in passing to give you a cool premise so you can play the game, completely unaware of the storytelling Goliaths the games industry has come out with. So maybe there's a lack of appreciation there for Halo as it was, leading to a misguided belief the TV show could do it infinitely better, simply because it's a more fundamentally storytelling dedicated format. When it comes to game adaptations, if you dismiss the source material outright, you're doomed to fail, and this is just another example of that. It also seems as if the standards of writing quality in television and films these days is through the floorboards, and that is an issue I unfortunately just can't bring myself to understand. In a cutthroat business such as film and TV, it's understandable that not everybody on the project is going to care, but the writers, producers and directors caring is non-negotiable, and though I can't say for certain if they did or didn't, I know which I'd bet money on being the case. To me, I'll probably remember the Halo TV show as just another ill-informed video game adaptation, joining the list of many that just don't quite understand what it is that makes a franchise special, and that's probably all there is that would need to be said. But I have enjoyed ironing out my thoughts on it for the past 22 minutes in fairness, and if you enjoyed hearing me out, regardless of whether or not you disagree or agree, I massively appreciate it. I haven't spoken about a TV show or a film in a while, nor have I actually spoken about Halo for a bit, so if this video seems a bit out of nowhere, I hope it was worth it. But thank you all for watching, I really do hope you've enjoyed this one. If you did, be sure to go ahead and leave a like, and if you're new, maybe even consider hitting subscribe. You don't have to, it would make my day if you did, but if this content isn't for you, if this channel isn't for you, I understand, we all have different tastes. I also feel a need to apologise for not uploading for 2 weeks, which is not how I want the consistency of this channel's content to be realistically, so I'll do my best to not let it go this long. But I have in that time been helping a mate start up his own YouTube channel in which he dedicates his content to car related things and motoring, and I'll admit the magic on that channel is all his, so in my opinion, he's definitely worth a view if that sort of stuff is your thing. And you can of course find a link in the description. I know he'd appreciate it and I most certainly would too. And that's the end of the admin I have to run through, so you're in luck. The end is upon us. Thank you all again for watching, and with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point, but until then, please take care, and goodbye.